This place is very small, but lots of things happen here. It's a subtropical island with a lot of different kinds of colorful fruit. It has mountains, but it also has beaches. It has stone road villages, but it also has tall, shiny skyscrapers. It has community shared bicycles, but it also has world record fast trains.
My country is beautiful. We are very famous for our tourism and for our food. We have a rich history, so that's great because we can never be bored here. Lots of things to learn over time. I think we are very well represented by our famous writers.
My country, it's new. It hasn't been around for a super long time. It's a country of quite a few different groups, quite a few different types of people. It's big. It's very, very big.
The 1950s was a very prosperous time. Sugar production and mix was one of our booming businesses. We had one of the most best educational programs. Many celebrities aspired to vacation at our places.
They call it a land so fertile that when you stick a branch into the ground, a tree will grow. And it has yellow fields and blue skies, and it's beautiful. But especially when my parents lived there, it was a very difficult place to live in.
1959, the revolution of the Communist Party takes over. And it seems from the flick of a wrist, it changes all. This is a way where our country's history was erased, eradicated, and years of hard work were destroyed in a minute. Many things disappeared. Your freedom of speech, your freedom of religion.
In all the stories my parents ever told me, it was always about what they couldn't do. They couldn't get this. They couldn't go here. They couldn't do this. There was no way to express any dissent because as soon as you did, the police could round you up and you could be sent away. And then nobody hears from you.
There's only one political party. There's no such thing as religion. It is one of the prompting reasons why my family had to leave and go to the United States. There was no future. If you do not belong to the Communist Party, you're just another peasant. And that is one of the biggest hypocrisies about communism. It promises equality for all, but it doesn't ensure that that equality is prosperous. It is an equality where it diminishes your liberty and keeps you stagnated for many years. A man cannot live like this. A man is meant to improve themselves constantly. How come a system that does not work has not changed? There was no way of choosing an opposition, no way of choosing another political party. One of the main reasons, the Communist Party would either put them in jail or kill them. Currently, there are elections, but these elections are illegitimate. How can elections occur when you only see one name on the ballot, one political party?
Technically, there was a voting system, but it was always for the same party, and they always did the same things. My dad always liked to tell me that in the capital, they decided how many eggs they would need in all the different countries. Because of that, my mom would stand in line in the weekends early in the morning to get milk because otherwise it wouldn't be there. And one of the biggest reasons why my parents decided to move, and my parents told me a story about how they went into a store and for the first time they saw rows upon rows of products. For example, it was yogurt. Back where they lived, there were two types and you either chose one or the other. In the store, they saw rows upon rows upon rows of different types.
So the United States, here you can belong to the Republican Party, Democratic, the Green Party, Libertarian Party, whichever party that best aligns with your views. Here you can go vote, you can voice. There's no such thing as an apolitical person. We're all raised with certain values and certain inclinations, whether you decide it's right, left, conservative, liberal. We all have a voice.
And so when you have a big country like that, the way decisions are made is obviously going to depend on a big scale and a small scale within that. People vote for several different positions on several different scales of authority. They do it on their own and then all together eventually. And opinions can be voiced through this, but there are also a myriad of different ways to voice your opinions because of the way you can speak in this country. A nice thing about this country is that the range with which you can speak is pretty broad.
Here in my country, people can vote. Actually, I voted for presidential election just a few years ago. It's really democratic. Actually, we are known to be a symbol of freedom. We were one of the first countries to have rights written in the Constitution. So here we have a Senate who represents the people. Then so we have a president and a prime minister. And we can elect the president once every 5 years. People are very comfortable about saying their opinion aloud, but it's not everyone who would do that. I think people who do that are either from lower classes and they don't really regard the way people think about what they think. 4. People from upper classes who are very confident about themselves and who knows a lot of important people, and they know that they can say whatever they want and they won't be judged. Otherwise, we have lots of newspapers, and you can often see on television celebrities or just people who are interviewed about their political views, and it's not always seen as controversial to talk about it in public, even though people sometimes they won't clearly say from which side they are on.
I grew up hearing that voting was a right, voting was important. Every election day was something that my parents made a priority, my grandparents. It was something that had been long fought for and that my voice mattered. Once I reached the age of 18, I was legally allowed to vote for the first time. And I chose not to at first, more from laziness and negligence on my own part, and just not fully internalizing it for myself until a couple years later when the first presidential election rolled around that I was eligible to vote for. That was really important to me in person, just getting to know people for who they were, regardless of their vote. And then going on to internet spaces where people seemed so defined by their votes in so many different ways, and just the tension that created. That was a really interesting paradigm to learn about as I came into voting.
People can vote here, yes. Whenever it's close to election day, no matter if it's for the president or for the mayor, there's always lots and lots of news about it. Even though people can vote here, some people say that their president is not real. Some people say that they don't belong to themselves. In fact, about 96% of people who speak their official language say that they don't. But the 1.5 of us who speak our language live on our island, and we just keep voting anyways. This place has freedom of speech, which again was not around 20 or 30 years ago. So before, this island was only, I think, second to Syria worldwide for being under the longest martial law. So that meant that if you were on the streets, you would see soldiers walking around with their guns. If you do something wrong, they can shoot you. If you say something they don't like, they take you away. So for a generation or two, many citizens and even high school students vanished, never to be seen again. But 20 or 30 years ago, everything changed. Like, people slowly gained more and more rights to speak. They were the first place on their continent to legalize same-sex marriage. Students started to have more human rights in class. It started to become illegal for teachers to hit students. Historians called it a miracle. Everything changed so fast. People made careers out of yelling at the government on TV. They reported on almost anything. Almost too much of anything. It's a bit infamous for being overly sensationalist. But whenever this island votes or talks about their democracy, they have to be very careful. Right across the waters is a very, very big country, and it has a lot of power. They are always watching. So the island knows that it can't mess up. 96% versus 1.5%.
Can people vote in my country? The basic answer is yes. Legally, everyone has a right to vote. That doesn't necessarily play out equally in every way. There are many different groups that I have witnessed experience roadblocks to voting, whether intentionally or unintentionally. I've seen students on college campuses struggling because there aren't polling stations available readily at college campuses, or absentee ballots are difficult. Oftentimes the students who do have the most access on college campuses are the ones who have the most systemic privilege, afford time to take off of work to go vote. Another way that I've seen that play out in my life is individuals living with a disability. A lot of times, polling stations, that might look like not having wheelchair access into a building, or not having polling booths that actually are accessible to those living with a handicap. I think as well, there are a lot of people in urban areas who oftentimes don't have access to polling stations as much, or they're discouraged from registering to vote. I know that that is an issue in some places, particularly people living in some low-income housing. Landlords or others involved don't want people's voices to be heard, and so they're discouraged from voting by maybe their rent is threatened, because the lower number of registered voters in one area, the more that affects different aspects of politics in the city and in neighborhoods.
There are other ways to suppress voters, including the closing of polling places, especially during the coronavirus pandemic, where areas that have huge demographics of people of color have had their voting precincts lowered significantly because they're citing claims that it's unsafe.
I have talked to many people in that situation who have expressed these things, and that definitely has influenced how much I personally believe that voting is equal in this country. Whereas growing up, I had this perspective that it was a right and it was accessible to everyone. That has changed over time through education and through hearing people's stories and through witnessing different things that keep people from voting.
I'm not very comfortable about your voting system, to be honest. I think it's so confusing. You have a way of counting votes that is so strange for us. So it's like proportional. You calculate each state vote. I think it's a kind of manipulation of the votes. So it's strategic. It's like you have to persuade some voters from specific states if you want to be sure to have enough votes at the end. But I think for me, it's not really democratic.
I think my biggest critique is that people are looking too far outward and not enough inward. They always lament how, oh, the president did this or the president that or the president this, when the deepest change that they can make is by choosing the right mayor, by choosing the right school administrators, by choosing the people that will affect their community proper. Because there's only so much reach that a president can have over a country of 350 million people. And my parents came from a place where they had absolutely no choice at all. It's crazy how neglected this right is when in many other places people dream about it.
So yes, the US government and voting system has a lot of problems and it needs to change, and there are people in power who do not want things to get better. The citizens, they have so much power, so much more than I have ever seen. And those who do have power have every right to make sure that those who deserve it, that those who do not have it, do have it.
Yes, you might think, I'm only one person. How is this going to help, or how is this going to contribute? Let me just assure you, you're not alone. A president is not voted by one person, it is voted by a majority of people. And that is sincerely one of the greatest things in our countries. One of the critiques I have of the voting system is that it is being attacked, it's being illegitimized, it's being considered a fraud. I think it should be accessible to whomever, including times as these, like a pandemic, where we have to ensure that the voting system, the mailing system, can ensure voters can have their say in these elections.
For my dish, I chose lu rou fen, or minced pork over rice, to represent Taiwan. A lot of Taiwan's history started after World War II. Everyone but the United States was poor because of the war, so in Taiwan, people would gather the small pieces left over from pork, and instead of throwing it away, they would mince it and then cook it with rice. Over the years, the dish became more and more extravagant. Everybody knew what it was. It smelled better and better. Suddenly, it became a famous Taiwanese dish. I chose this dish because it represents how Taiwan had almost nothing. No human rights, not even the right to be called a country, small and unwanted like the leftover minced pork. But they added what they could, when they could, to themselves, and they created something that is known and available to everyone, like the freedom to speak, the freedom to write, and the freedom to vote. While their freedoms are not perfect, it has come such a long way, and it's not going away anytime soon.
So my dish is the ficelle piquant. It is a traditional dish from my region. So it represents the north of France. I chose it because it is made of different ingredients. You have the crepe, and inside you have a slice of ham, gruyere. So gruyere is cheese. You can have cream, mushrooms, and you can add whatever you like. And I think it represents well French society, because here there are a lot of migrants. So they are like the French people, and then you have lots of black people, Muslim people, lots of different nationalities or Catholics.
Now, a very famous Cuban dish, I think, would be boneless chicken breast with black beans and rice. So one of the most significant parts of Cuban rice with the white rice and black beans is that they're completely two opposite things. I mean, one is starch and it's a white grain, and the other one is the black bean made with fiber. Although they're different, when they come together and are kept in one plate, they complement each other. So as we see the rice and beans working together alongside, I want to keep in mind that whatever this outcome of the elections will be, recall that we're going to have our differences. There's no way around that. And it's going to sometimes drive us apart, but our unity as an American should drive us closer.
Onto my dish. This dish is called Spätzle. It's an egg yolk-based noodle from Germany. I'm from German heritage, but I've been born and raised in the United States, just as both of my parents have been.
My family also comes from largely German heritage background.
It's a very simple dish. You don't need anything to cook it. except salt and pepper and butter and the noodles themselves. But these noodles supposedly take 20 minutes to cook. To me, I can liken this to American democracy, because to me the right to vote and freely speak your mind is a right that's small. It's something that we take for granted sometimes, and it's something that should be given to everybody. But it's not. And it's taken a lot of time, just like these noodles do, to grant that right to vote to all of people.
In the winters, the only thing you could find in the stores was maybe bread and maybe a few grains, and they were very expensive. So if you didn't prepare for the winter, you could starve. So they learned to pickle and to preserve their own things. If you wanted to eat tomatoes during the winter, the only way that you'd have them is if you make them yourself. My parents are from the former Soviet Union in Ukraine. And for my dish, it's a metaphor for you have to be prepared. You have to take your life into your own hands. But also it shows what happens when the people around you don't get to choose how they live their life.
I believe right now the United States, it's been handicapped with this pandemic. It's been handicapped recently with the protests, the police brutality. And we need to come as Americans and try to stand up and overcome this, just as we have done in the past history.
In the US right now, so there are problems with policemen shooting black people in the streets. In every country, there is a problem with dealing with people who are different from us. Because we have a problem in France too. We don't like talking to people who are different from us, and we tend to say mean things about them, even though we don't know them. There are so many inequalities, even though the Constitution says that we are equal, all equal. I think my dish can represent the union of all different people. It's like this dish in itself cannot be eaten without at least one of these ingredients, because otherwise it would be something else.
I'm glad that my parents raised me with like a Soviet culture. What the music they listened to and the food they ate, that's part of my history. I'm glad I live in the US because here I can say what I want to say, within reason, of course. Can't yell fire, but I can express my own opinions, and I have a say in how I live my life, and I can go to the mayor and voice concerns. I can go to teachers' unions and talk about solutions, and it's something that I am guilty of neglecting, and something that I think many Americans are also guilty of neglecting. You curse the man, but realize that the government's by the people, for the people. It shouldn't be what the government does to you. It should be what you as a collective do for yourselves.
In the United States, for those who can, you can go vote and no one says it's wrong. Everyone can say so many things. Everyone can do so many things. Everyone around the world acknowledges that you have a president. And yes, the president can do things that are not good, and it can change. Not in a day, but not after forever.
It started out as one dish from one culture and representing kind of one heritage and one historical background. But then over time, it changed and it adapted. And so you have bacon and you have cheese and you have things that are not necessarily historically German, but they've come in from other outside influences and kind of meshed together to create this one dish that has roots in one culture, but it's also uniquely now part of another culture. And I see that play out in my country's voting system because I think everyone who comes into the US comes with one cultural background or heritage, right? And yet here we come and we all are in one place. And as a result of that, we're all responsible to create something new together and to envision something better through the result of all of our backgrounds and values and cultures coming together. And we get to express that, and we get to have our voices heard through voting and to create that something new and unique and beautiful together through that system.